Welcome to Pursuing the Muse. I'm your host, Tom Compton. Our guest today is Eric Ambel, who truly embodies the word versatile in his work as a musician, producer, and even venue owner at one point. Eric says his many musical roles enhance each other. With a career spanning decades, Eric Ambel was a founding member of iconic bands like Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, the Del Lords, and the Yayhoos. 25 years ago, Eric co-founded Cowboy Technical Services, a recording studio which has flourished, finding him to be highly sought after for his production skills. In this episode, we delve into his deep insights as a wearer of many hats. We'll discuss the creative process behind songs like Judas Kiss, his current work with Sarah Borges, and much, much more. So let's jump in with Eric Ambel.
And the roses in the closet, all summer we watched them fade. Now they crumble to the touch, like the promises you made. When I close my eyes, I can still taste your lips. Now left here alone, betrayed by a Judas Kiss.
Tom Compton here with Pursuing the Muse. This week we have Eric Ambel. Eric, thank you so much for joining us in the virtual studio.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So this is generally a songwriting podcast, but you have worn so many hats, and I think they're interrelated, that with all of your varied experience and all you do, it can be fruitful discussion. Generally, I'd like to go back to, how did you start writing songs?
Well, that took a while because I was super interested in music as a kid, and I'm from Batavia, Illinois, and we had a really good school music program there, so I took piano lessons, played the trumpet, taught myself how to play guitar, much to the chagrin of my parents. Uh, and I was always taking apart records because of like playing in the band and marching band and stuff. All that stuff informed my rock and roll, because, I learned so much about arrangements and, the power of like the intervals that John Philip Sousa would use to make it. Basically, he was like the forerunner of the power chord, to make
Well,
these things work outdoors. And I mean, I was in bands and playing on records and uh for a long time, and I had this manager, and I didn't really think of myself as a songwriter, and I had this manager who was also had a publishing company. And at one point he was like, "Hey, I hate to break it to you, but you are writing songs. You're making the contributions that you're making to these other people's songs are so big that it is songwriting." So
you,
that didn't happen to me until the 80s, until I'd already, you know, played on records and gotten record deals and stuff like that. So I'm kind of late to the game in the songwriting thing.
so is it a difference between arranging and contributing to the melody itself?
Uh, well, a song really, I mean, arrangement isn't necessarily part of a song, but, coming up with a part like a melody or a chord change, that that's a song. I guess I just come to it from a mechanical point of view, and just how when you just introduced me and said that I did all these different things, the truth in that intro is that all these different things help each other, you know? All the different things that I do, they help each other. Sometimes people ask, "What do you like best? Do you like writing songs, or do you like producing, or playing guitar?" It's like my answer is that I don't have to answer that question. That's my good fortune.
Sure. All of the above, huh?
Yeah, because they
That's
each one helps the other one, and if you're not doing the other one, you're not getting the perspective of the other position.
Gotcha. So when you're in high school and you're in marching band and learning piano and guitar, was rock and roll your your draw, or were you
Yeah.
even
Oh,
going in other directions?
no, I really loved rock and roll, and but, I graduated high school in 1975, and, in that time, like, in the Midwest, there really was not an original music scene, like, uh, I mean, at that time, I'd never seen any band, including big bands, that played their own music in a place that couldn't hold a sporting event.
Mm,
It wasn't People weren't playing original music in clubs in 1975, you know, except for maybe Cheap Trick, but got their start. The first time I saw them, it was a 3-set gig, and they did a set of Beatles, a set of Stones, and a set of originals. That's what they called it, originals, and that was like when you were trying to get a gig, that originals were the kiss of death. You had to, like, try to only do a couple of them.
sure. That's funny. So
Yep, true.
now, were you going into Chicago from Batavia for to be able to mix in the scene, or was it even out in the suburbs a bit?
No, I wasn't really, because, my family had a summer home in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I really just went up there every chance that I could. I went up there all summer, and, it wasn't till I moved away to college when I really, felt like I could sort of follow my path musically, you know?
Gotcha.
So I wasn't under, like, I was a kid, and I lived in a small town, and I lived outside of town, and I didn't have my own car. I couldn't really do what I wanted to, you know?
Sure. And then you went to University of Wyoming?
Yes.
Okay. And then is their logo, did you adopt that as your own kind of logo, the bucking
Yeah.
bronco?
Yeah, that's actually a famous guy, and it's from a famous photograph of, at Cheyenne Frontier Days, which used to be thought of as the granddaddy of all rodeos in America, and it was a guy named Stubbs Farlow. I mean, it's a kind of a iconic pose, and, like, my band in Wyoming, we were Wyoming's first punk rock band, and because we were from Wyoming, we were kinda cowpunk before anybody said cowpunk, you know?
Before Jason of the Scorchers, took the label.
Yeah, well, and lots of other people, but, I mean, that's where we were we were gonna wear a leather jacket and cowboy boots because that's what we had, you know?
Nice. So, you graduate from University of Wyoming, where do you go musically from there?
I didn't graduate, I attended
Oh,
the
okay.
university.
Sorry.
Uh, and at a certain point, we had done, like, everything we could out there. Uh, we found this, record store down in Denver that went on to be a real famous player in music in America, called Wax Trax. They later moved to Chicago,
Yeah.
and we went down there to Wax Trax, and which was run by these 2, British gay guys, and they had all the records. They had these punk rock records that you couldn't get anywhere, and they had it. Their store was set up like an English store where you could actually grab a 45 and go listen to it on headphones. Um, and we told them that we had a band and we already had a little 45 we'd made in Laramie, and they weren't too wild about our band, but when they found out we had a pretty decent homemade PA, they started putting us on shows. And so we would open for national acts, and eventually we knew that we had to we had to get out of there. So and New York was further, and it was gonna be cold when you're broke, so we went to Los Angeles.
Ah, okay. What was the name of the band?
Well, we were the Dirty Dogs until we got banned by the university, and then we changed our name to the Accelerators, and there's a little tip of the hat to Batavia with the, Fermilab, uh, so
Very
we could
good,
get
nice.
so we could get one more big money gig out of the university to so we could leave town. So we became the Accelerators, and then when we were out in Hollywood, we were the Accelerators.
Okay. Will you do like the Roxy, or where were you with the Viper Room? What kind of gigs were you getting out there?
Well, we were playing, there's smaller places, Club 88 and, The Blind Pig and Blackies and, you know, the Starwood. We played the Starwood. Um, we never played the Whiskey, but then I played those places after the band broke up and I was playing with, Top Jimmy and Rick Rick, which led to the Joan Jett thing.
Ah, okay. And it was that like your big break there? How did Joan see you there, or did someone recommend you to her?
Um, I she held auditions, and I had met her when she was trying to put together a band, and we were hanging out at a gig, the band X. We were hanging out, and I was like, boasting to her, like, "Well, you can have your auditions, but when it's over, I'll be your guitar player." And actually, that's what happened. And for like more than 30 years, I thought that I had just won the audition, and consequently, the guys in my band, uh, Gary Ryan and Danny O'Brien, who went up by the name Danny Furious, we all won the audition, you know? And this was the same group of guys that backed up Rick and backed up, Top Jimmy before the Rhythm Pigs. And for 30 years, I never knew the story, and then I was hanging out with John Doe one time, and here in New York, and he was like, "Hey, did I ever tell you that story about that audition?" I was like, "What?" Because he was helping when you're auditioning individual players, you need somebody has to play drums while you're auditioning the guitar player or play bass or so John was helping Joan, and Joan was like, real like a established rock star on the Hollywood scene, and she liked punk rock, so she was kind of a type of royalty. And so John Doe, there were like 180 guys signed up for each one of these positions. They called me and said, "You got it." But John Doe, 30 years later, tells me there was a break in the auditions, and I looked at Joan, and he was, "Joan, these guys are all assholes. You're gonna have to ride around in a van with them. Eric and Gary, they already have a band, and you know them, and they're cool. You should just get them." And to which she replied, "Okay." And that was it, you know?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, but I didn't know for years and years, so and it's I'm still friends with, John Doe, and it's all kinda good, you know?
There's a life lesson in there, to be a good person.
Yeah, well, yeah, 'cause, at the time in Hollywood in 1979 or '80, that was when I don't know if you ever heard of this GIT, BIT, it was like, you know, Guitar Institute of
Oh, yeah,
Technology.
yeah. Yes.
And so there were all these guys, walking around in black clothes with gig bags in the sun and, trying to play like super fast
Right,
shredding and fusion, you know?
right, the Spinal Tap approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I used to get all those guitar magazines back in the '80s, and then GIT, BIT would have their ads with their leather-clad, students,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was intimidated, so I just flipped right past.
Well, it was kind of like music as weightlifting.
Yes. There was some kind of performance enhancing going on, that's for
Yeah.
sure. So, see, the Blackhearts really could have been called the Accelerators, it sounds like.
Well, it wasn't it was the other 2 guys, they weren't from Wyoming. The Wyoming band had blown up and the guys
Oh,
had
okay.
gone home,
Okay.
so I had sort of moved on, and for me, both Rick and Top Jimmy had a lot of cachet on the scene, like in Top Jimmy's band, I replaced Billy Zoom, and so that was a real big deal, and Rick had a band called F Word, which is arguably the first punk rock band in Los Angeles, so, I'd kinda moved up, and then the Joan thing, we went from having a band to, we played a month of shows just like the, Who did at the Marquee. We picked the slowest night, Monday, or I forget if it was Monday or Tuesday, and played a month, and by the end, the place was packed, and that's something that I used again when we started the Del Lords later in New York City. We did the same thing at CBGB's. We went to Hilly, and we begged for this gig, and to play once a week for a month on "What's your slowest night?" And he was like, "Tuesday." So, "Okay, we'll play Tuesday." And, that kinda launched the band here in New York also.
Sweet. So how long was it between Joan and the Del Lords?
Not that long. I was out of the band, I went back home to Illinois and worked at concrete construction in the cold, uh, you know, and saved up my money to come back to New York because I really after living in Los Angeles and then living in New York, I really liked New York. I felt like you could get done in a day, which with what would take a week in Los Angeles, and it was also New York at the time. It felt more like you were judged on what you could do rather than what you have or, like, what kinda car do
Mm,
you have, what neighborhood do you live in, Los
more down to
Angeles.
earth.
Yeah, well, yeah, just sort of performance-based.
Sure. Yeah. And then how did you, run into Scott Kemper?
Well, there was a guy I was working on trying to bring Rick to New York, and I was playing with a few different guys, and back then, there's no answering machine, there's no pager, you had to sit around and wait for a phone call, and a guy who I had played with, he was like, "Oh, yeah, Scott from The Dictators, I played with this new band, and, the other day, they were really awful." It was like Chuck Berry and Johnny Cash, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds really awful." And then as soon as I got off the phone, I started calling around trying to find Scott's number from somebody, and, I did find his number, and we played the very next day, and that became the band. Our drummer, Frank Finaro, he showed up for the first time the same day I did, so that became the band right then.
Nice. Was the concept of the Del Lords to have 4 frontmen?
In the beginning, it was, and it in the beginning, it really was, the first record, everybody sings lead, and then we got a manager who was kind of, afflicted with, conventional wisdom, as was the record company, and they were like, "You can't do that," it's like, why not?" There's a lot of bands that did. How about the Beatles or the Cars, like, they're
Yeah.
anyway, they wanted to focus on one guy, and they went around the table, and the other guys said they would give up their singing thing, and when it got to me, I was like, "I'm not giving my singing thing up because it's gonna be needed on the gig."
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, so
Excellent. And then how did it work with that approach? Um, did you do co-writing or would you each bring in the songs you were fronting?
Scott Kempner wrote virtually all the songs in the Del Lords. He would bring them in, uh, on acoustic guitar, and then we would just kinda figure out who could or should sing it, and he really was writing songs for us. It wasn't like he was writing the songs and then we played them.
Mm,
The songs were kind of informed by we were all living together and we're all broke and, working our ass off with this band. And so it informed the songwriting. Sometimes you would write a song about something, like the song on the Del Lord's Frontier Days that I sing, Shame on You. He wrote that for me. And that's, about how I felt after getting kicked out of Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. So it
mhm.
was a informed kinda writing.
Were you getting, writing credits for guitar parts?
No,
It was all fleshed out already?
yeah, but we did have, no, it wasn't fleshed out. I was contributing those things, and that's what that manager later said, "You should have been getting for
Ah,
coming
okay.
up with this signature line, you probably should have been getting it." But it wasn't quite as bad as it sounds because, there's the publishing company. So, like, in songwriting, there's the writer half, and then there's the publishing half,
Mhm.
right? And with the Del Lords, so Scott got the whole writer's half, and then the publishing half was split 4 ways between the band because we all contributed.
Okay.
So it wasn't it y you follow me? So we
Yeah,
had
yeah. It
some
wasn't
skin
like
in the
Rod
game.
Stewart using the Faces as his backing band and kinda
No.
it was
No.
it was much more solid.
Yeah.
Nice. I
So
got
and
you.
then we did end up, writing songs together later, but I really came from this sort of musician background where for a long time I thought all the songs had already been written.
Mm, gotcha.
Uh It wasn't until I got, like, a 4-track and started messing around and I often would especially with the songwriters that I had worked with, how good they were, I would, soft pedal my work by referring to this is a song I made up myself, you
Mm,
know,
mhm.
as
Yeah, I know
opposed
that
to a
feeling.
song I wrote. Yeah.
Right. So at what point were you messing around with the 4-track? Was that after the Del Lords or while you were still in them?
No, it was in the Dell Lords. I had a succession of I think the first one I got was the Fostex X15, and then got a Tascam, and then I got after the Dell Lords, I got a Tascam 688, which was a 8-track thing, and then, I had started producing records while I was still in the Dell Lords. Afterwards, I started producing more records, and then, I've owned a full 24 track recording studio that does bands for the last 25 years of Cowboy Technical Services.
Yeah, you've had some prolific output. How are you going like 24/7 over there or do you take have downtime?
Oh, we have downtime. I have a partner, and there's a couple engineers that work out of there too. And the way everyone works nowadays, everyone's got a home rig, so a certain part of the project is getting done at home, but it's the band tracking and the mixing gets done over there. We just had a huge upgrade. We just got a brand new API console and these super fantastic handmade in England ATC monitors. So we just had a monumental upgrade at the studio within the
Wow.
last couple of months.
Wow. What's the lifespan on something like that?
What do you mean?
On the piece of equipment you just put in, is that like gonna take you through to retirement or
It it'll last longer than I'll live, I'm sure, you know?
so this is
Yeah.
this is
I
it.
mean, we have stuff in the studio. I have microphones that were made before I was born, you know?
Back when quality meant something.
Yep.
Nice. So we kinda jumped ahead, but maybe we can get a little song centric. One of my favorite songs of yours, and I don't know if it was Scott's because it came out of the Del Lords, right? It was, Judas Kiss. Can you talk a little bit about how that song came about? Because it was recorded with the Del Lords, but then it's also on, Knucklehead, isn't it?
Yeah. So, Scott wrote that song, and I related to it, and you know, I said, "I wanna sing this one," and, it was we lived in the East Village, and in the '80s, the drug thing was pretty bad there. People would get sucked into it, and a lot of people didn't make it, So that's what the story was about. Then the Neil Giraldo, produced the album, and he kinda rearranged it into a really up-tempo, peppy version of the song, uh, and there's Pat Benatar and Sid Straw are singing on it, and, Lou Reed is in the video, but I just thought, a really good song can be done more than one way, and I just kept messing with it for years afterwards, and then I came to a version that's on, uh, Knucklehead it's more bluesy, and Steve Earle is singing harmony. That's more to me, the the music is fitting the lyrics better than the Del Lords version.
Yeah, yeah, I totally see that because those the 2 versions are very different, and I think it capture your Knucklehead version captures kind of the darkness, um, a lot better.
Oh, thank you. But, I mean, I like the Del Lords one too. It was the '80s, everybody was playing so fast, it was kinda crazy. But that I still do the Judas Kiss you know, that the Knucklehead version, it's, when you're playing a gig, you gotta have some change up songs, and that thing really does the job as a change up. You can kinda bring it down,
Mm,
and people are drawn in by it. Uh, it's a really good song, I think.
Absolutely. So, at what point did the Del Lords break up? The first time, right?
Well, the album Lovers Who Wander, on that record before that, Scott had brought in the songs on the acoustic guitar, and then we'd worked on them together to come up with the arrangements and stuff. And then, uh, but on this Lovers Who Wander, the I think the Scott had a publishing deal, or the manager had a little demo studio, and Scott started doing the demos with Manny, the bass player, and it it was just it sort of took I felt like it had taken me out of the process, like, okay, here's the guitar lick and here's this, and it wasn't the organic group process that we were doing. And then I just eh, I I just wasn't happy with it, and that's when I left the band, you know?
Okay. And what year was that?
I don't know, maybe 90 or
Okay.
90?
Okay. It did how long after that did you wind up hooking up with Steve Earle?
Oh, that I'd done a lot of other things. S had been producing bands, and I had, couple solo records out, and I had started the Lakeside Lounge, which is a bar that I owned for 16 years,
mhm,
and, I had started the studio too, and I was friends with Steve, and his manager at one point called me up, and I know I took the call at the Lakeside and said, "Hey, we got a world tour that's starting in, like, 3 weeks, and the guitar player just quit." And he was looking for a friend of mine's number, this other guy. And I was like, "Hey, I want that gig." And the manager was like, "Well, if you got your own thing, you got the studio, you got the bar, you can't do this gig." And I was like, "Hey, if I'm my own boss and I can't make that decision for myself, then I got a real problem." I said, "I will do the gig." The only thing I had to say was that I was like, mixing the record, it was either the Bottle Rockets or the Backsliders. I just had to say, "Look, I can't even look at these songs until next week, but I will be your guide." And it was my friend, I told him about it, and I was a better guy for the gig because I could do the harmony singing, and, it was a it was a great, uh so I was there for 5 years, I think 3 albums, uh we won Grammys, we did all the TV shows. We went to Europe, we went to Australia, we went to Canada, and, you
Saw the
know
world and beyond.
yeah, and Steve's songwriting, when you're playing as a sideman and you're on the gig and you're looking at that set list, a lot of times you're there and you're going you got that one that at the start of the gig, it's maybe 7 songs down, and now it's 5 songs, now it's 3. There's a song that you're kinda dreading, you know? But with Steve, every one of his songs was so great. He just didn't have any of those kinda songs, every song was great.
Yeah, yeah, Steve is a a special talent.
And then so I ended up in the studio, playing on the records and seeing his process in the records, which was different than what I had seen. We'd go in to do the record and he'd maybe have 2 songs done, and we'd kind of do a song a day, and we'd cut the basic track and then we'd stay with it with the overdubs until it wasn't mixed, but it would be done. And you know, then he would literally go home and write the next day's song, you
Wow.
know? Yeah.
Wow.
And
Is
on top of that, when we were a lot of times when you're in the studio and you're cutting a basic track, you're just cutting the basic track and you're trying to get the drum fill to be right that goes into the solo or into the bridge, stuff like that. But with Steve, 9 times out of 10, the lead vocal would be live on the track,
oh,
and he was picking the take based on the lead vocal, so get
you had to
be
be
on the
solid
stick.
every
Yeah,
time.
exactly. So it was a different kind of, creation, and it was really something to see, you know?
Wow. Are there any, specific songwriting things you learned from watching Steve so close?
Well, I remember when I very first started playing with him, like, I had just loved that, Guitar Town record so much from the day I got it, and, the Del Lords, we used to listen to it in the back lounge of the bus. We had a bus a couple times, and, it's just an amazing record, and so there I am, I'm playing these songs, and there's a song called "Someday" that
Mhm.
has this baritone guitar lick, and the first time we played it at rehearsal, it goes from the first verse, and then there's a little release section before the second verse, and I started playing that lick, and everybody's like, "Whoa, whoa," that lick doesn't come in till the end of the song, but it's just so prominent that in your mind it's there before it even shows up.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, was he typically that intricate with, repeating parts that would be their own life form, you know?
No, I don't know, you know, it wasn't like, things were being dictated for me to play. Here's the thing, we're performing these songs as a four-piece rock and roll band, and we're performing songs that were recorded by maybe 5, 6, 7 people.
Mm,
So, you have to kinda distill it down to what you think is the most important thing, the event to happen. That's sometimes people describe these things as musical events, like
mm.
here's the intro, the band comes in, that's an event. There's the first chorus, and then the harmony doesn't come in till the second chorus. That's an event,
Yeah,
So it really was to thinking about what would be the best way to have the events come in.
sure, sure. Yeah, and
And that would
that's
be a live arrangement as opposed to a recorded arrangement.
right. Did did Steve like to reproduce the record as much as possible, or was he fluid about it?
I'd say that he was fluid about it. Some things just you knew they had to be there. Uh, you knew they had to be there. So, but it wasn't like, and even some solos, like, it wasn't like I had to play that solo, but I wanted to play that solo because it was, the solo in Someday is such a great solo, or the solo in Guitar Town, it's such a great solo, I wanna play that solo.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, the stuff that touches you, you wanna definitely highlight and respect, so I gotcha. So you're playing with Ste how did you wind up and I gotta bring up the Yayhoos, one of my favorite bands, how did you the Yayhoos wind up getting together?
Well, this manager who that I spoke of earlier who convinced me that I was writing songs,
Mhm.
he started, putting me together with some people to co-write, you know?
Mm.
And I had met Dan Baird, like the Del Lords did a bunch of gigs with the Georgia Satellites, and he was like, "I could put you together with Dan Baird," you know? So I called Dan and talked to him, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, you come on down." At the time, he was living in Kentucky. "Why don't you come on down here and you can stay, and I got this little rock house out back, and we'll work on some songs." And then he was like, "You know what else? We could get Terry Anderson." He was in this band, The Woods, and, we could get Terry because he's a kick to hang out with and a great songwriter, and the f if we have the 3 of us, we'll never get stuck. We'll always have some idea, you know? And, so we did that songwriting session, and a bunch of those songs ended up on my, Loud and Lonesome record, and, even at this session, he was like, "If we got Keith Christopher, we'd have a band." And so I have a solo record coming out. Terry has a solo record coming out. Dan has a solo record coming out. And his record was on Rick Rubin's label.
Mm.
And just before his record came out, Rick Rubin got in kind of a spat with the producer, Brendan O'Brien, you know, and Brendan O'Brien had been Rick Rubin's right-hand man on a whole bunch of records. And so they got in sort of a spat, and because of that, uh, Rick Rubin's label pulled the support from Dan. So
Oh.
it was like we got on the phone and it was like, "Hey guys, well, you know what? Let's just go out and play as a band, and we'll all trade songs, and we'll play songs off of each other's records." And that's how we organically, I think the first couple times that we went out playing, it was at billed as Dan Baird and the Yayhoos, and then it became the Yayhoos.
Nice. Yes, definitely not definitely not a Dan Baird solo project because of the talent in that group.
And then, so this is when the Lakeside, my bar in the East Village that's no longer there, it was there from 96 to 2012. Uh, we There was a guy who, had signed the satellites in the first place to Elektra, Howard Thompson, and we kind of twisted his arm to give us some what they used to call development money.
Mm.
And back in the day, that would be enough money to go into a pro studio and record maybe 3 songs. But
Uh-huh.
we already had decided, look, Howard is just doing this for us. He's not going to sign the band. So instead of that, we decided to take some. I didn't really have a recording studio yet, but I had some outboard gear because I was producing people. So we took my equipment and rented some equipment and went to Terry's dad's house and did a week of like songwriting and demos,
Mhm.
in Terry's dad's barn. And that tape sat around for years, and we mixed it a couple of times. And eventually, we were lucky that Bloodshot would put it out. And, because at the time we just said that we were tired of making copies for our friends, but that's the record that, Fear Not the Obvious, that's how it came to be.
That's awesome.
And here's a scoop for you. Bloodshot Records was bought by another company and it's kind of been relaunched. And that record, I don't know the release date, but it's coming out on vinyl for the very first time soon, in the next uh 4 or 5 months.
Oh, fantastic. I will
Yeah.
be I will have an eye out for that. I would love to get a vinyl copy. So, one of the songs on Fear Not the Obvious that I love is, Baby, I Love You. Can you talk about where that one came from?
Well, I had been kind of playing with the lick and playing it, and I had started writing some words, and we were actually at this big festival, Roskilde,
Mhm.
which is in Denmark. I mean, it's one of the biggest festivals in Europe, and we, did our sound check and went back to where we were staying, and we had a couple hours before the gig, and asked Keith. I was like, "Hey, Keith, that song, if you come over to my room, I think we could finish it." And he never showed up, and I finished it myself. And uh, so that was really something. I was excited that I'd finished the song, and then after the record was out, I get this note or email or something that's, they're gonna use it in this movie, a James Gunn movie called Slither, which is a horror comedy movie starring Elizabeth Banks. And
Nice.
so I went to the movie, like, the premiere week, and there was no information where it was in the movie or anything like that, and I just figured that it would be on for 20 or 30 seconds in the background, while somebody's in their car. But I'm sitting there with my wife and the movie keeps going and I didn't want to say anything in case we'd miss it. But we both, my wife is a songwriter also, and we both were like, hey, at a certain point, it became clear there's only one place this song is going to work. And sure enough, they said the last line of dialogue in the movie, and then they played my whole song in as the closing credits song, and it was just it was one of the most unbelievable things that I've ever been a part of.
Good synergy. It is
Yeah, and because of the genre, the horror comedy aspect of a movie like that, that movie is on cable TV every October, before Halloween for a whole month.
there you go. The gift that keeps giving.
Yeah, it's not a big one. It's not like Dan, writing Keep Your Hands to Yourself as the first song he ever wrote in his life, but it's nice.
Yeah. I mean, James Gunn has kind of a talent for using rock and roll songs in movies like all the stuff with Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's like an intricate part. So it's very cool that he could use your song that way.
Well, I still have yet to meet James Gunn, but you know, we're talking about that record came out in 2001,
Mhm.
and I got to trade messages with him about it on MySpace of all things.
MySpace, there's a callback for you.
Yeah,
Nice. Oh my gosh. Was he in your top 8?
I don't
You remem
know.
you remember that? You could rank your top 8 friends on MySpace?
Yeah, who was the guy who was like the creator, like John
Tom.
or something, or Tom.
Yeah. Yes.
Christ.
Tom wedged himself in.
Yeah, that's
Good
funny.
times. So, the Yayhoos happened, and they were on and off, and so at this point, were you, like, spreading your wings in New York? You got the Lakeside Lounge, your Cowboy Technical Services. it sounds like you were mentioning 25 years. So is that now where you kind of landed and has been your home?
Well, the producer thing, I really enjoyed doing that. It's like I really enjoy working with bands, and I kind of got this niche of, for me at least, of either working with bands or working with singer-songwriters that want to sound like they have a band and not
Mm.
as opposed to like an album project, you know?
Right, right.
So so I do a lot of that and I really enjoy that. And then, you know, there's a lot of bands that I've worked with that I end up playing with the bands. And through a similar thing, uh, there's this woman, Sarah Borges. I produced a record for her. The first one that I worked on for her uh, came out the same time, around the same time as my Lakeside album, which was a record that I did with Jimbo Mathis.
Mhm.
And so we started playing some gigs together. And then, first it was like me, doing a few songs with her band. And then we kind of joined forces and we've had this band. And eventually I got her, one of my best New York drummers, Kenny Soul, and Keith Vogley, the bass player from the Bottle Rockets, he came on board, so we have a really good band, and we play, and we also, um, on her last couple of records, I've done quite a bit of songwriting with her too, probably more, than other things, and a lot of those songs are kind of, ones that where I'll work up a track, uh, that's, like, eh, I think that the greatest gift to songwriters that technology has given us is the iPhone. Because when we were young, we always wished, "Why, wouldn't it be great if we just always had a tape recorder, and you'd never have to forget a lick or anything?"
Yeah.
Now we do, we have this thing, so, you know, I uh, I keep guitars around the house, and every once in a while, I pick one up, and if something new comes out of it, I'll put it down, and I save it to what I call the riff bank, and then every once in a while, I'll look through the riff bank and see if there's some stuff I really like, and then I'll go upstairs. I have a small home set up here and, put it down with a drum beat and kind of arrange it the way in a little bit of structure where it be kind of obvious that this is the intro and this the verse and the chorus and so on. And so I'll send those to Sarah and then she'll finish them.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
that's been really awesome outlet for me.
Yeah, that's really cool. How many, files would you say you have in your riff bank right now?
Oh, I don't know. Probably a lot. I don't know. But there's
Like
probably
thousands?
no, no, no. Maybe I don't know. Maybe 50, and then at any time I'll have 10 or 12 that I've arranged, and then if the arrangement is done, then it turns into a song, and then I'll dump those, and, I just keep repeating the progress every once in a while.
Sure.
My I work on other people's records so much that my own music tends to take a back seat, but when I get the chance, I'll go through the riff bank and go, "Oh, yeah, that's a good one." And it's funny, do you use that thing, on your iPhone?
I have a Pixel, but I do use the voice recorder app and capture things, like before they drift away and I lose them forever.
Yeah, but the funny part is that it saves with the address that you're
Uh,
at, On the iPhone, it saves with the address. So I've got these ones for this crazy address in Colorado. We're on tour and we're at somebody's house, and I picked up the guitar, and then I ran in the other room and worked on it a little bit before I recorded it, you know?
Nice. It's like a little scrapbook.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. So, in terms of Sarah Borges, what what do you see that distinguishes her songwriting style from other people out there?
I would say that she's really fearless, with her songwriting. I mean, she covers a lot of topics and I really like the way she plays the guitar too. When the first time we were in the studio, we put some song down and she goes, "So are you gonna redo my guitar?" And I was like, "Why would I do that?" It's like everybody else always redid my guitar. I was like, it just made me feel bad. It was like, you know, there's nothing like two people playing guitar. You know,
Mm.
that's the beauty of the guitar compared to maybe some keyboard instruments or there people's personality really comes out of their guitar, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't think of too many times when I would want one personality when I could have two, you know?
Sure. Yeah, bring some more life to it.
Yeah.
Cool. So, how many records have you done with Sarah at this point?
I kinda you know what? I opened up a page on my computer so I could possibly answer this song. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 albums, and then we're more than halfway through the 4th.
Oh, great. There's another one coming. That's good news.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you'll hit the road again with her?
Yeah. I mean,
Nice.
and when we play a show, it'll be booked as Sarah Borges, but it's about like 60/40. We do a bunch of my songs, and it's great for me 'cause it's a great band. Like, I recently did a New York show. I don't play that often, Eric Ambel, but I did one recently, and I used that band because that's kind of my band with
Mhm.
Sarah. Uh, so, we're always doing some of my songs, and she's got a booking agent, and she has a van. These are
Oh,
things you don't necessarily have in New York, you know?
right, absolutely. Where are you gonna park it?
Right.
Cool. So, now you were mentioning, your the Lakeside Lounge and the Lakeside album, and it brought to mind one of my favorite tracks on Lakeside is, "Here Come My Love." Can you, talk a little bit about where that one stemmed from?
Well, that was a Scott Kempner song, and, I just when we worked on the, Lakeside album, Jimbo Mathis I had produced a record for him called White Buffalo, and when I was down in Mississippi working with him, I just really dug it, and I also sa in the back of my mind, I was like, "If I make another record, I want Jimbo to produce me," and,
Hmm.
so he came up to work on the Lakeside record, and we did, like, a couple days with just me and him, where we would track me playing guitar and singing and him playing drums, and then we'd put bass on it, and his plan was, like, Let's do 2 days like that, and then on the 3rd day, have somebody else come up here too," So, on the 3rd day, my buddy Phil Cimino came to play drums, and it was a pretty loose session, and at one point, we were wondering what to do, and that song, "Here Come My Love," I have a one of those binder books with some lyrics, and that's a Scott song that I always kinda liked, and I would play it every once in a while, and I was like, "Well, let's try this one," and that's how we got that.
Yeah, it's got a great feel, great vibe.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
and, you, you're definitely one of the top tier producers out there, and I'm sure it's your talent in that arena that is reflected on so much of that work. Now, bef- before moving on to what's ahead for you, I wanted to ask about the Elvis Club Del Lords reunion. Was that the first chance you got to act as a producer for that group of guys?
Yeah, it was, and so what happened there was this guy in Spain who named Pepe, who was a promoter, like a concert promoter there, and a lot of my bands, I play with Steve or the Yayhoos, or I do my own gig. We would do well in Spain, so we would go there. And Pepe would always be at the shows and, like, "What do you think?" He's like, "Oh, this is good, but it is not the Delords." And he kept telling us, you guys gotta play." And literally, he wore us down, and finally we said, "Okay, we'll do it." But, in the time since the Delords broke up and that time, uh, I had the studio, I had a whole resume as a producer. I learned a lot about producing. Sometimes I refer to it as by negative example. Like over the years before I started doing it, I learned what I wouldn't want to do.
Sure.
And it was kind of a dream to be able to use what I learned on the Del Lords. And we were like, if we're going over there, we need to record some songs. We can't just go over there and play our set list that we did in 1990. So that's how the record started. And in fact, there's a EP that we pressed up of rough mixes that we called Under Construction because they weren't really finished. And that's what we took that with us and we played those songs, at the
Uh-huh.
at the gigs in Spain. And then when we got home, then we continued and it turned into the album that became Elvis Club.
Very cool. How was the writing process for that? Was it like putting on an old glove, or was there a little rust at that point?
Oh, no, because Scott never stopped writing songs. And it was like, it was like, okay, we can do this. And with me, handling having the studio set up the way that would be advantageous to us and being the producer and, having learned some tricks that I knew would work with this group of guys, it
Mhm.
just seemed to be easier and quicker than ever before.
Excellent.
So, and then I got to make it sound the way I always hoped it would.
Awesome. Sounds like it worked out as a best case scenario.
It was pretty great. And then, Scott died a couple of years ago, and he had this frontal temporal, uh, a type of dementia,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and that was really hard for everyone. But there is there, Del Lord's record that's probably 80% done that we had been working on before he couldn't work anymore.
Wow.
So I hope to I hope to I've just kind of been waiting for the right time to finish that, because for a while it seemed like it was not the right time yet, but eventually we'll finish it.
Yeah, I can only oh, man, that's really awesome, and, I can only imagine you handle that with care. So, uh, as we start to wrap up, what sort of stuff do you have coming down the pike? I mean, I imagine you got a lot of production work coming. You mentioned Sarah Borges. Any
Yeah,
other?
at any time I've, got anywhere from 3 to 6 records going at a time, and or in various states of pre-production or tracking, overdubs. Sometimes stuff is done. I have a couple really good ones that are done. I do you know Tommy Womack?
Yeah, yeah.
So
He's
Tommy, he's from Nashville, and he's a great songwriter, and he was friends with Scott, and after Scott died, we did this special show on what would have been Scott's 70th birthday, and Tommy got a hold of me right away and said, "I really wanna come and play at the show." And, uh, and we hung out at that show, and then Tommy decided that he wanted me to produce his next record, so we've got that record that's done. I'm not exactly sure if it comes out this fall or this winter. He came up here and recorded with my guys, and, that one's really good. There's another band, Mick Harrison and the High Score. Do you know Mick?
I'm not familiar with Mick.
He was in the V-Roys years ago.
Okay.
Uh, he's in, Knoxville,
All right.
and that's a band record. Like, those guys are a band, and I went down there and recorded them there, and then I brought the stuff back up here to finish it. There's a thing. Have you ever heard of this software called Audio Movers?
I don't know audio movers.
Okay, so Audio Movers was this plugin that was invented by these young Russian guys, and I guess it was around, but I didn't find out about it until just before the pandemic. And what it is, it's a plugin. You put it on in in your DAW on Pro Tools or Logic. You put it on the master fader, and it generates a code that's just a URL that you can send to a bunch of people and
Hmm.
have them all, wherever they are, be listening in full high resolution every time you hit play on your computer.
Wow, that's cool.
So, during COVID, I mean, you can see how this would be amazing because when you couldn't get together with people, but
Mhm.
we still use it all the time now. Like, for instance, when I was mixing, Tommy came up here for his mixing, but when I was mixing Mick Harrison, he and his guys were at like three different people's houses. And for the mixing, they just sat around and had this on their rig. And, so when we're doing that, I'll bring a laptop to the studio with a chat window with everybody on the chat. And, as I'm playing the stuff, then I might type in to the thing, I just took a little bottom out of the background vocals, and then they'll go, "Yeah, I heard that." It's a and the we pay a subscription for the thing, but the listener doesn't need any equipment, or they don't have to pay, or so it's a really invaluable tool. So it makes it so I can do remote mixing for people, a lot better. And during COVID, there's artists that I work with, Emily Duff, who's a New York songwriter. And during COVID, we just couldn't have that many people in the studio at the same time.
Mhm.
And so when we were cutting her basic tracks, I had her come over to my apartment and record guitar and vocal to a click track, and then I had took those to the studio and had the band play to those, and she would be listening along at home, while we're cutting the tracks for her songs. It'd be like,
Yeah,
yeah, I like the third
instantaneous
one.
feedback there.
Yeah,
That's so cool. So, yeah, I mean, it cuts out so much tedium of, like, uploading to Dropbox and downloading and listening and then
right.
yeah.
We used to have to go. You'd have to get somebody, say, "Hey, I'm going to be mixing on Tuesday. Can you be available?" Then you'd have to upload the song. Then you'd have to print it, upload it, wait for the person to listen to it. You could lose anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes each song waiting around. It sounds like you understand this.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, yeah, time is money, right?
And
It
inspiration too. It's not just the
Yes,
money.
that is a very good point. I was just quoting Billy Crystal as a mime in Spinal Tap when I mime is money, I'm sorry, that was the Billy Crystal. Alright, so you know what? You've been mentioning your band, that you have there. Would you liken it to, like, a Muscle Shoals kinda situation where, the house band just adds this great personality? Is it that kind of a situation?
Well, it's similar. Basically what I've got is I have a group of guys that are really good musicians that it's very similar that I think of as song guys. You know, uh the kind of records that I like and the kind of records that I make, the last thing I'm looking for is a hot musician.
Right, right.
I'm looking for a guy who wants a copy of the lyrics, and is going to be playing the song. So I have a bunch of guys like that I know from playing with, and I enjoy. It's not the same guys all the time. I enjoy working with different people because different people bring different things to the equation. But yeah, that's part of my job. If it's not a band thing, if it's one of these singer-songwriter things, then I'm usually putting a band together.
And are you thinking with the song, like, it's gonna fit this guy better than
Yeah,
this
yeah.
that's cool.
And a lot of times when people are asking me to do it, they're wanting me to play guitar too. I don't
Mhm.
know if you heard that I did a record a couple years ago for do you know Jerry Joseph?
I don't know Jerry Joseph. No.
Oh, he's really good. He gets lumped into the jam band thing, but he's not a jam band guy.
Hmm,
He lives in the Pacific Northwest. This record is called, Baby, You're the Man Who Would Be King,
hmm.
but that's got me and my guys on it, you know, uh,
Alright.
that's
I
a
will I will
that's a
check that out.
that's a good one. Yeah, they all kinda carry my personal money back guarantee,
Well, you
you
stand
know?
by it, that's what we're counting on.
Well, the records that I'm making, I'm trying to make a record that somebody's gonna love 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It's not gonna
Right.
be dated. It's it's just gonna be great.
You're not cranking out A-frames.
Nope.
Excellent. Alright, Eric, oh my god, thank you so much for talking to me. Before we sign off, where can people keep up with you and keep tabs on all the amazing things you have going on?
Uh, Tom, the I have a website at ericambel.com. There's a website for the studio at Cowboy Technical. Uh, the Following me on Instagram is pretty good because there's cat pictures and food pictures and guitar pictures, and if I've got something going, I let people know, and I'm the Eric Ambel at Instagram.
Yes,
So,
I love your online presence. I like keeping up with the sandwiches you're having and see
oh
what's
yeah, the
going on at
backyard sandwich series.
exactly. And the Gordy's webcam updates.
Yeah,
Always
I'm
good to
going
see
up
what's going
there.
on.
I'm going up to Fontana in July. So I'm going to my high school class reunion, and then I'm going up to the lake for the first time since we sold the family house.
Mhm.
It's going to be a little bittersweet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. You got a place to stay without the family house there?
Well, we're gonna stay at the Abbey like the tourists do.
There you go. There
So,
you go. What's the burger joint that's in Fontana? It's
well, Chuck's
Chuck's. That's it.
Chuck's is the bar that's, it's on the water. Chuck's and Gordy's were both owned by Gordy, and he just couldn't have every business that he owned named Gordy's. And then when Gordy died, he left the two businesses to his two sons. So one got Chuck's and the other one got Gordy's.
Oh, okay. That's that's a little Fontana trivia for you.
Yeah,
Good.
I had my first legal drink at Chuck's, and where those little, those beautiful slender, like 8-ounce beer glasses that was a quarter for my first one.
There's nowhere to go but up from there.
Right. One time I asked my mom for $2 because I was gonna go what we would call down there, and she only had a 5. And
Uh-oh.
imagine the trouble you could get in.
I don't know if I can do the math on that. That's 20 beers right there. You almost got a case. Oh,
25 or yeah, 20. 20. Oh my god.
got to take my shoes off to do the counting.
Right.
All right. Well, Eric, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and
Thank you too, Tom.
this is you have an endless depth of knowledge, and when talent mixes with good person, the sky's the limit, and you're certainly proving that.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope to see you. Well, if we put out another Sarah record, we'll definitely get back to Fitzgerald's. So,
Yes, I will be there with bells on. I've seen Sarah at Fitzgerald's. One time Terry Anderson was the opening act. That was a
oh,
fun show.
nice, nice.
So full circle.
All right,
All right. Well, thank you, Eric.
thank you, Tom.
We'll catch you down the road.
Okay, bye
All
bye.
right.